Welcome to Rev Up Your Potential with Hilda Gann, the podcast where entrepreneurs, business leaders, and HR professionals share tips, strategies, and trends in their area of expertise. They also talk about their successes and struggles along their career and business journey. If you love to learn through storytelling and find people fascinating, join us. Welcome, Hilda Gann, Rev Up Your Potential. Today, my guest is Birgitte Tan. She is a CEO and founder of Joyful Riches Beyond Grief. She has successfully helped more than 25,000 people move through and beyond grief, helping them through their loss and trauma. She's a certified grief specialist and the author of a book called Seeking Peace. She's experienced a multitude of grief since the age of 5, and she uses that experience and her knowledge to help others with evidence-based tools that will help you through suffering from grief, heartbreak, and recover from that completely, even when understanding, insight, and mindset coaching has failed. Thank you very much for joining me today, Birgitte. I am looking forward to really talking about a subject matter that people really don't feel comfortable talking about. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Hilda. Thank you all for joining us today. It's an honor and a delight to be here.
Thank you. So, I shared with people that you've experienced grief, multiple traumas and griefs since the age of 5. And now here you are, a grief counselor who started her own company. Tell us about how you came to start this company and what it's like. What do you do?
So with my grief specialist service, what I do is twofold actually. I work with individual where I help you to completely and fully recover from your grief. Unlike one of the many myths or misunderstanding about grief out there, it is possible to fully recover from a heartbreak. So there is a myth that once you grieve forever. But that's because of many of the misunderstanding about grief and the evidence-based institutions, all fours where I'm certified from, provide the tools such that you will be able to do that. So that's the individual parts of that. And with that, it's actually just a simple grief classes. Either it's one-to-one class or it's a group class, whichever that you feel comfortable participating in. And it's a 6 to 12 weeks class, depending on what you need. So it's something very simple. It does not take hours and hours. You don't have to do something weird or spunky or isolate yourself a whole week or something like that. And the other part of my work is I also help businesses. Grief costs the workplace, costs businesses $113.7 billion in loss.
Wow.
And this was in 2017, before the pandemic. We don't have the numbers since the pandemic, but we estimated that based on the level of stress and losses that people experience, we estimated that 2 to 3 times. And that's a lot of loss from grief simply because businesses first don't know how to recognize it. Many people think grief are only the big four, but it's actually not. And then also, even more importantly, even when they are able to recognize it, which when I work with a lot of human resources team, they like, yeah, we understand all this can cause grief, but they don't have the resource to easily, tactfully, when you are in business, easily and tactfully and economically help the team as well.
You mentioned two things that I want to. You said the grief, the top four, or the or it's more than just the four main ones. Can you explain what is first of all, what are the four main ones, and what are the other ones that we should be thinking about?
Absolutely, absolutely. So many times people think that grief are when there is a death, divorce, dire diagnosis, and job loss. That's a commonly recognized
Yeah.
grief. You got super ill or a divorce or something. While there are actually more than 40 different causes of grief. And that's because the true definition of grief is the unsettling feelings caused by a loss, hope unmet, or a change in your familiar routine. So hope unmet could be for many of us, right? For most of the world, it's almost 3 years ago, we were told, there's this virus going around, and here in Los Angeles, where I'm based right now, we were told, we're gonna have this lockdown 2 weeks before, and you might well have to work from home. Just adjust for a few weeks. That was 3 years ago. And it's still going on back and forth, talking about hope unmet, right? We were given a hope of 4 weeks, not 3 years. 3 years later, it was like, oh, who knows what happened. And then Hilda, changes. Let me ask you, do you know, in this modern world, do you know a single person who has not experienced change? Our audience as well, do you know a single person who has not experienced change in let's say the last 3 years?
Right. Like, no, yes, everybody has experienced some change. COVID came and all of a sudden I had a household of 5 people, and they're still here, and I'm still making dinner for 5 adults. They help, but not very much.
Right.
It's let me share, like from the States, they were a little bit more relaxed in certain states in terms of COVID. I myself live in Ontario, and I remember going to watch Romeo and Juliet ballet. And when I went down there, they were announcing it was going to be spring break for students, and they said, well, I think we need to be safe. We need to, instead of only taking 1 week break, we're going to take 2 weeks break. Right. And then on the news, they were saying, oh, this virus could be lasting up to 12 to 18 months. And I'm going, really? That's crazy talk, because my career started off as a nurse. And in my understanding of disease and nursing, there was no way that we would lock down companies, businesses for that. And then there's the HR professional in me who had been running businesses and being involved in HR for like 15 plus years at that point. And I said, there is no way in the history of workplaces that you shut down for 18 months. That's crazy talk. And I thought, okay, they were right. And more so. So, yeah. Yeah.
Imagine the adjustment, and it's like it was a huge adjustment when everybody has to lock down. But then there is another adjustment when people start to come back, and depends on where you are. There were times people start to come back, and then you lock back down, and on and off. And each time it's rattling, and then we wonder why people are so unsettled, and that manifests in the mass exodus, which is what in the HR term we say, it's in the mass exodus, and as well as
the great resignation and the great the quiet resignation, and
exactly,
yes,
exactly. Yeah.
Quiet quitting. Yep. Yeah. Have you noticed yourself, your observations in your work, that more and more people are experiencing grief through COVID?
Absolutely, and that comes from multiple things. It's by now it's practically everyone knows someone who lost somebody. because of the coronavirus.
Yes.
And so that even if they are not, before that it was like, oh, we hear our neighbor's uncle passed away, and we're like, oh, we feel for you. But it's kind of like the neighbor's uncle passed away because of who knows whatever the neighbor's uncle passed away.
Yeah.
But now, because we are all under this, when somebody experiences something, we relate to it. There is a relatedness.
Yeah.
Relatedness, when it's one after another, it's consume us.
And when you think about it, we know somebody who lost somebody, or we experience loss ourselves, and not just loss directly from COVID, but loss during COVID. My aunt passed away. I didn't even find out for like several weeks because the family was busy grieving, and of course only 10 people could go, and so we suddenly lost our normal customary ways of managing grief, coming together as families during grief. So these were all, talk about changes, even that is a change, right? The customs, the cultures, the way we grieve totally had to be evolved.
And grief need to be expressed, and so that being able to come together and all these things, being able to be there. Practically all the clients who has lost during grief is, all of them said, I wish I could have been there, and now people are so much feeling a lot of guilt and regret and so forth. But grief, and even without those, grief need to be able to be expressed. It's, if you're holding it in, it doesn't go away. It morphs into something else that affect our productivity and our life in general. But not being able to express, not being able to have, when the gathering, it's kind of like the camaraderie, and not being able to have that, being isolated itself, just the isolation itself is a
Yeah. You talked about how you help organizations with grief. Tell us a little bit more, because some of my listeners are business owners themselves or human resources specialists. And I know that more and more people are realizing that there was a lot of mental health stresses. There was a lot of grief experience during COVID. What information can you share with business owners and for human professionals?
So if you're asking how do I do that, then in almost all cases, the way I mentioned earlier, to tactfully, because particularly when we are talking resources, business, if it's your individual business, even this is for business owner, but also particular human resources, a lot of time it's with education. There are so many misunderstanding about grief. There are 11 what I call myths, the Grief Recovery Institute call myths and misunderstanding. And a lot of time, understanding this alone can make a big difference at the workplace and in the productivity. A lot of time, people don't even realize that, that the reason this person's behave this way is because of grief, or the reason I behave that way is because of grief. And when we have the awareness, so I come in and I do speaking, I teach class, and that way it's something that allow people to be immersed without pointing fingers, so to say. And of course, I also provide for those who would take the step further and say, you know what, I realize I'm experiencing this and I want support. Then that's where the grief class is, which is very convenient. You do it from home through the remote platform through Zoom safely. And so that's the service that I have.
You shared in your bio, and I shared with the listeners, that you have experienced a multitude of griefs since you were 5 years old. Can you share some of that experience with us?
Absolutely, yes. It's a multitude of grief. It goes from anywhere from abuse, loss of loved one, pet loss, and my kitty boy is my boy. I don't have human children, and so it feels definitely, and it come at a time for some of us we experience this. It's come at a time when everything else was falling apart, and he was the only one there that was my only friend, and so. But abuse, pet loss of a loved one, divorce, financial loss, cancer, illness, and I probably forget a couple other.
So can you share some of those thoughts and feelings you were going through and how you move beyond the grief? I mean, you obviously decided to become a grief counselor from some of this journey. Can you share some of this parts of this journey that made you say, I want to help others?
Yeah, and I can definitely. So in going through that was really challenging. I'm just going to give an example to make it easier. But
Yeah.
one of the thing I actually didn't mention is being. Sometimes we have people in our life where we're being doubted. I mean, even that alone can cause a lot of grief if you are finding it tough times and people really going against you, so to say.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in college, for instance, as well as growing up, I continuously being told I was too stupid to become a doctor, to the point that even though I was already in doctorate training and my background is in veterinary medicine, actually my doctorate I'm a board certified veterinarian medical oncologist, but I have professors and advisors in the medical school, in veterinary schools, telling me, you should drop out, you should stop, you're too stupid. And granted that my English was not, I was not a native speaker, and that could have contributed to my challenge and a lot of other things. So being put against and a lot of other things. It's looking back. And what motivates me to also help people is it is the support. It's allowing support. There were times when I could not even get out of bed, and there were times with all of the people going against me and telling me I'm too stupid, I was too stupid, too slow, you name it. There were times I was looking at the railroad track and said I can just sit there and everything will be done. And at the same time, it's allowing support and allowing support from the correct person, from the correct professional, that in whichever scenario, reaching out. If you reach out for one, I've reached out for one person and it doesn't work. It just keep reaching out and until I got the correct support to be able to go on, because at the end of the day, when we were against so much, it's tough to to do it on our own.
So how did you come to say, okay, I've had these traumas, these griefs, and I struggled through them. I want to sit on a railway track and end it essentially. When was that light bulb moment that said, I'm a survivor. I've survived all this and now I want to help people? What was that moment that made you decide to devote yourself to creating a, a company that can help others move beyond grief?
Uh, Thank you for that question. So yeah, definitely. So the moment that I decide to devote myself full time in the one of the moment, I would say, that devote myself full time. I always want to help people. And then at one point, I remember one of my clients. I've already been helping a lot of people with grief because of my own experience and the learning that I gained from trying to help myself. And it's one of those that as you help yourself, you can help other. I have a lot of my patients and so forth. And one of the clients, as I do that along, one of the clients was an elderly gentleman. And using the system, the evidence based system that I have now, that gentleman who has tried numerous other things. He's been to therapy, he's been to coaching, he's been through counseling, even like some retreat that lasted 2 weeks or something like that. It cost him
Wow.
fortunes going abroad and all these things. And all those, and he took this class. It's simple class, and he said, "Wow, you know what? Not only it helped me with the current problem where he came to me, it's actually helped him release and recover from things that's been following him and impacting his life and productivity and his relationship, or the lack of by at that time, for 40 something years." And
Wow.
when I said, and he said, "You really need to do this for people." So
That's when you decided to start your own company?
that's when I decided to do the grief, to put even more in the grief, and do the company's been around for a long time, but to do grief full time,
Mm.
actually to write my book, the Seeking Peace book, as well as bring this more into the world, instead of initially I was doing it in a convenient way, where it's like, okay, you know what, somebody referred to me, it's just a word of mouth. It's like,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah. Okay.
I got it. I got to bring this to more people, because the people deserve to be able to recover. And that's one thing people don't realize is many times we think about grief being sadness. But that's most grief, most of the time, are not expressed as sadness. The most common expression, and this is important in the workplace, most common expressions of grief is anger, not sadness. Even when somebody grieves the loss of a loved one, there is almost consistently has a component of anger. Not everybody's unique, but the majority still have a component of anger. And when the cause of grief is anything but the loss of the loved one, there's a lot of anger. And unresolved, when the grief not completely resolved and you don't recover fully, this grief, over time, you don't feel the intense emotion anymore. But that's because it's morphed into behavior problem. It's morphed into physical or behavior manifestation, morphed into physical problem. It morphed into our ability to work well and to have a good relationship.
I find that interesting, never thinking deeply about this, to say that it becomes anger. Now, is that anger towards using a loved one? Okay. Is the anger towards the loved one for leaving, or is the anger uh, then like reflected into other people? You're angry because they still have their loved one, or you're angry because they've been bugging you all their lives anyway, so you kind of displace it to another person.
So I'm going to quote one of my clients. Well, the anger. I'm going to quote one of my clients. The anger part of this. The first part is to answer your questions. The reasons that it causes anger. When someone grieving, they feel that they cannot control things. We cannot control what happened.
Hmm.
That we prefer not happen. And then we also cannot control our own emotions. Grief comes like waves. It's hit you and it's up, and then it's like you feel like you most people who are grieving in the intense part say it feels like an out of body experience. It feels surreal, and
Hmm.
they
Hmm.
behave and do and think and say things that they prefer they've never done or said. And so the lack of control is one, the feeling that they are not able to control things. And when people feel they cannot control things, they got angry. Or the majority of people get angry when they feel they cannot control
Yeah.
things.
Okay.
And
I hear you.
unfortunately, it's also morphed into the reason, one of the common reason people do not reach out. Sometimes if we're talking back about business and HR, we have people that we have resource. And we tell our team member, hey, there is resource, and this is just one of the reasons. But when it comes specifically about grief, one of the reasons people doesn't also want to work and walk through their grief, and people prefer to just kind of like run away from it or push it away, is, as my client says, I feel that if I face this, I'm going to lose control.
Okay.
Well, it's
Thank you.
actually the complete opposite. If you actually sit there and walk through your grief and go beyond that, that's when you take control. Imagine if you actually feel that, facing the grief or working with it is losing control. As long as you have to push it away or hide from it, you cannot run from it. And anybody who is running from anything has control. No, you don't. It's actually when you turn around and face it is when you have control.
Yeah.
So the control thing is the cause of the anger, and also the cause of the hesitation of being able to navigate grief.
As a grief specialist, I hear what you're saying. You want to help people move beyond grief. So I'm looking at your logo behind you there that says Joyful Riches Beyond Grief, Igniting Your Full Spectrum Riches. Can you elaborate on that? Because, some people think, well, this grief counselor is going to take me to a state where I'm okay. But this sounds like you go beyond okay to being joyful about life again. So share with me this significance of your logo here.
Thank you so much. Absolutely, yes. So I said you can cope, you can survive and be okay, or you can have a full spectrum rich life. Which one would you prefer? Would you prefer I have a headache or a heartache or multiple of ache, and I'm gonna cope with that. I'll take Tylenol until your liver scream at you, but I'll take some medication until I can't take it anymore. Or perhaps, okay, yes, I do this, and then okay, well, I something happened. I go through that, and well, I'm surviving like many people nowadays. Or would you prefer for you and your loved ones? Because the tools that people gain from working with me is actually something that allow them to help themselves. And everyone who really put themselves and practice the tools says, this helped me and help other people around my life, even people like their neighbors or something like that. And so would you love to have you and your loved one and your team, if you are a leader of a team, to be able to have the simple, practical, effective tools such that you can create a full spectrum rich life. And we talk about full spectrum because we're not just talking about money. It's emotionally you're great, relationship, physically, and so on, and of course financially as well.
So for those who have experienced grief, and I believe all of us, if not most of us, have experienced grief, what you're able to help people do is either individually move beyond grief to a way of thriving beyond grief, or helping organizations, human resources, corporations, companies, to work collectively to help the people in the organization work through grief. So I'm going to take you, we had a conversation earlier about grief, and oftentimes people don't know what to say. They're not experienced, they're awkward, and sometimes they put their foot in their mouth, so to speak. And I can remember when my mother passed and people thought they were consoling me at my visitation. She says, it's okay. I understand how you feel. I lost my mother 7 years ago and I still feel this way. And I'm thinking, really? You're telling me this now in my moment of angst, that I've got to go through this for the next 7 years? Like, this was not good advice. So, and the nurse in me understood this person was trying to be thoughtful, kind, caring, but her words were much the opposite. She was giving me this never-ending pit that I was going to be down in a trap way underneath, and I'll never get out because 7 years is a long time. So you're laughing too. And I think when we had that conversation, you shared what some suggestions, opening lines to help people learn how to say things that are more comforting.
Yeah. I do want to point out one thing really quick. The example you were just giving, and my heart goes to you. I can only imagine how you feel in that moment. You're like, what did you just curse me? But that is such that is such the an example of
Yeah.
the word hurt people, hurt people. In there is a phrase, hurt
Oh,
people. See, my heart goes out to her too, this lady,
yeah. Yeah.
because it's still hurting from grief that is not complete, that she has
Yes.
recovered completely. And then without realizing, so it's many times we think about the word hurt people is because, oh, because we are not feeling good or grumpy and then we're going to be mean to other people. It's not always that. Actually, a lot of time it's not that. Most of us are aware after some times of our behavior, but even just that, I hear many people who says, oh, I got you. It's you'll survive. It's been 20 years and I still cry every day. And I said, oh God, for the person who's experiencing the loss like yourself. The other part that hurt people. I'm going to touch this briefly, and then we'll share the resource actually that everybody can have. But the to touch this to the other way people hurt people is something that most people are not aware of. It's which is a study done. This is a scientific study done by the HeartMath Institute and also multiple other institutions, but that they show that what's going on in your heart. So whether you're experiencing anger or grief or joy or other anxiety and overwhelm, what's going on in your heart actually is measurable first, measurable by EKG 3 feet, 3 to 6 feet outside of you. So if you have a loved one who are around you, or you work and you're back in the office and you are communicating and in the meeting and things like that, even if you put on nowadays in the social media, everybody say be positive or be strong or put on a smile or something like that. Even if you put on a brave smiley face, it doesn't matter. People who are sitting next to you on each side will feel your unsettlingness. And guess
Mm.
what? They're going to capture that. And this is very important in the family, but also in the workplace. The most recent study that is not, that the HeartMath shows actually is even more impactful than that. They shows a study where they put one individual, and this individual got this could be a person, but they also use dogs. They put one individual in one side of the room, so in one corner of a room. They have another person who is a trained HeartMath person come in, and the other on the other end of the room. They're not paying attention to each other, and they connect everybody to EKG. So what the study shows that the first person that come in first, they come in and think neutral baseline. They see the EKG of everybody, and then they have that person leave a different time, come in and think something that upset them. They see a change in that person EKG, but also a change in the dog or the person across the room. Same thing. They leave, come back, think something that really make them sad. It's influenced the person on EKG. but also the one across the room. And so for us who are in a workplace, for us who are in living with other people, even if it's just a pet or a plant, we want to keep in mind, yes, for our own well-being, but for everyone else's around us, because across the room, man, can you imagine? That's really the saying, the hurt people, but also the way what you say, and one of the things that a lot of people don't know what to say is definitely when somebody else is grieving. And saying something like like your example, or saying something like, oh, you know what, I know how you feel. Many times people say it's, particularly if you have had a similar experience, many people say, I know how you feel, I know how you feel. That actually doesn't go well with griever, because everybody different. And so if you have a similar experience, then you can say, I can relate to you.
Mm-hmm.
Not I know, but I can relate to you. And everyone different when we're grieving. So if you said, oh, my heart goes to you, I can relate to you, and the person don't ask what happened to you, don't elaborate. And the same thing if you are, whether at the workplace or say with your acquaintances, you know something going on with them. Many times we say, we see somebody and we mean well. We want to know how they're doing, and we say, how are you? For people who are grieving, when somebody asks us, how are you? It's either make a grievers confused or make them angry. And the reason it make them confused is if they say, well, I have a recent loss. What do you mean, how am I? Do you really want me to tell you that I have been crying myself to sleep? I couldn't even take a shower today and all these things? You probably don't. So what am I going to say to you? Do you want me to lie? The second part is make them angry. For some people, they perceive it, oh, you just don't care. You're saying things just as a passe, so to say. It's a surface thing. You don't really care. On the other hand, if you just say at a simple time specificity of how are you this afternoon, how are you today, that change all those to I'm going through thing, and you care so much that you want to know how I am this afternoon.
At this moment, yeah.
And there are a lot of this. There is many of this in what to say and what to do with people who are grieving. That will be here for another 2 hours. All these resources, I have prepared this, and you can find all these resources as well as all the different myths of grief, an overview of them, actually right on my website, joyfulrichesbeyondgrief.com. When you go there, you see the do's. It says do's and don'ts and myths. It's complimentary for you to download. You don't even have to leave your email or anything like that. It's just a gift for all of your audience.
Great. And for people who have not noticed, you do have your joyfulrichesbeyondgrief.com right there in the screen. So people can go to your thing and then download this. You said the do's and don'ts of what?
Do's and don'ts when someone's grieving.
When someone's grieving. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. You've given us so many insights into how we can move beyond grief, whether it's us as individuals or organizations and HR professionals who may want to connect with you. The other thing I loved is this last tip that you just shared with us about how do you create that connection with people? Don't confuse them, don't anger them. If you're not sure what to say, wow, what a powerful statement. How are you feeling today? That's a good icebreaker for people who really care and don't know what to say. And I know that person meant well when she said to me that she knows how I feel and told me she was doing it for 7 years. And fortunately, the nurse in me understood why she said what she said, and I didn't think that was going to be a parallel for me. That's certainly not who I am, but that certainly was her way of just trying to be helpful. And I think your tip and strategy was really good. Any other things? I mean, you've given us lots of advice. What's happening next for you, Birgitte?
So what happenings next for me? A couple things. For those who are experiencing different things, I do a lot of online event accessible from right where you are, and it addresses different aspects of grief and or grief from different causes. For instance, for February, we talk about how grief impact our relationship and how to be able, of course, the tools on being able to move forward from there. There are two events. One event coming up this Sunday. Actually, it's called Clean Heart, and then there are a couple events. But I do event on 1 to 2 event on every month to be able to allow people to access this with different topics, as well as the other part is I also for people who are experiencing things right now or know somebody, I have an open line grief chat where you are welcome to share what's going on and just kind of receive the support camaraderie from everyone in the group as well as from me. And this is on Wednesday late at night. It's called Late Night Grief Chat with Dr. Tan. There's information on my website. And yes, it's late night. It's designed for when grief keeps you up at night. When we're grieving, many of us has this experience where you cannot go to sleep or you wake up in the middle of the night with the things spinning in your mind. And so it's Late Night Grief Chat, 10 p.m. Pacific time, but it is meant for when grief keeps you up at night. And so, yeah, all my social medias usually will share my company Facebook as well as the LinkedIn, and my website will share about the different events that I provide for people to have more resource.
Thank you. And I see your contact information is there on the screen. Is there anything else that's missing in terms of contact information that we should know about?
No, you can reach me at any time at drtanforgrief@gmail.com or to check different events.
Yeah.
Or to sign up for updates from me, just go to joyfulrichesbeyondgrief.com because that's when we keep update. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook as From Grieving to Joyful Living, or my name Birgitte Tan. So you can reach me to any of those. Instagram as well, Birgitte Tan. That everything that all the service will be announced there.
Well, thank you very much for coming on as a guest today, sharing how you yourself experienced grief and decided to help others and create this company that really uses your knowledge and your experience and your scientific way of helping people through grief. So we really appreciate you coming and sharing your wealth of knowledge and your specialty.
My pleasure.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank those of you who are listening or viewing the Rev Up Your podcast on YouTube. And if you like it, give it a thumbs up and share it with others. And think about subscribing to Rev Up Your Potential. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to Rev Up Your Potential with Hilda Gann. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our podcast on YouTube and Spotify to stay up to date on our latest episodes. For HR tips, news, and strategies, or if you're interested in being a guest on our podcast, visit our website at peoplebrightconsulting.com.